This conference will now be recorded.
So, welcome everyone. My name is Soumya and I'll be your host for this session. I would request everyone to go on mute, and if you will have any questions throughout the session, you can send them through the chat bot, and we'll also take questions at the end. Let me introduce you to Techcanvass. Techcanvass is an IT certifications training organizations wherein we help students to crack their certification exams in first attempt. We are authorized training partner for IIBA Canada and PMI. So we provide all the IIBA certification courses like ECBA, CCBA, CBAP. We also train people for agile analysis certifications. And since we are training partner for Project Management Institute, so we provide courses into project management. And we also have domain courses into banking, finance, healthcare, and many more. Today we will be discussing about the tips and tricks to crack the CBAP exam. And with us, we have Puneet. So, Puneet has over 13 plus years of experience as an IT business analyst in the BFS industry. He is CBAP certified and he has worked with a lot of companies. He has implemented multiple regulatory and management reporting projects with global clients and delivered projects at various stages of their life cycle. So I welcome Puneet and I would request you to take the session ahead. Thank you all for joining and I hope you all have a great session.
Thank you, Soumya. I hope I'm audible properly, Soumya.
Yes, you are clear and loud. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Welcome everyone to this session on tips and tricks to crack CBAP. Um, I hope it's not overloaded with the information because I would rather have everybody keep it simple as much as possible. So in summary, before I even begin, I can give you a summary that you have to keep it as simple as possible. CBAP is a very comprehensive exam, both in terms of course material, skill set, experience, etc. So the objective of my presentation and my personal recommendation overall would be to keep it as simplified and as natural to you as much as possible. Having said that, let's begin the presentation with two anecdotes or two quotes. Abraham Lincoln once most famously said that, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first of four sharpening the axe." So it's basically, I put this here to remind you that it's always important to get your bases cleared and be sure of what you're doing before you kind of attempt things or go for the big guns. You get your basics right and then you go for the advanced level. So even in case of CBAP, you need to understand the material thoroughly before you judge yourself by some practice tests and stuff. So that is kind of the anecdote I'm trying to put here. And another one would be something that Michael Jordan said, that I've missed more than 9,000 shots, lost almost 300 games, 26 times I've lost the winning shot and missed. I failed over and over, and that is why I succeed. I think that also applies to my personal experience with CBAP as well. When I attempted CBAP, I had attempted at least, if not 300 practice tests, and I did not clear maybe 290 of them on practice level. But I kind of got the idea on what to do right and what not to do wrong. So it's okay to make mistakes in practice. It's still practice. You can do it as much as you want. You can test yourself any way you want, but don't get disheartened, because when I was doing it, I realized that I was losing a lot of hope. In the batch that I worked with, the first guy, actually the first one who took the exam, he said that I got bored and I did not want to be disillusioned, so I kind of took it, and it worked. He kind of did it, but I took an exam 3 months after him, and I had more failures than him in numbers. But it worked eventually in the end. So don't lose hope in CBAP. So that is another of the moral that I wanted to add before we begin. A little bit about me. I have 14 years of experience as an IT business analyst. I completed my CBAP certification in December 2020. I have previously worked with ICICI, EY, and I'm currently employed with Macquarie Group. I have implemented, as Somya mentioned, multiple regulatory and management reporting projects with global clients. These are some of my highlights of my professional career, and I'm also an Axiom Controller View consultant and trainer. A couple of disclaimers that the views expressed in this presentation are my own and are not reflective or cannot be associated with any of my current or past employers. And Techcanvass and I, although we will try to make it as much as clear for you on how to approach this exam, but we do not guarantee success based only on the points mentioned. So you might find more things to do. Some things that I will mention may or may not work for you, and you may have to kind of customize it along the way as you study and prepare. So Tech Canvas and I do not guarantee only on this, but this will definitely help. What are we covering today? We are going to clear a few assumptions. We're going to identify what do you need, how should you study, what should you practice, and 24 hours ago earlier, one day before the exam, what should you do, what's in the exam and what's outside the exam room that you're going to do, and we'll summarize the entire discussion on a general note. Right. Some clearing out the assumptions, myths versus facts. Myth might be a few of when I started it out, at least it was applicable to me that professional certifications are easy. It's just going to be easy because I kind of did the Axiom Controller View certifications quite easily. It was small one, so I was under the impression that professional certifications are easy, but it turns out that they are not. CBAP definitely is not an easy examination. So when I started on that journey, it turned out to be, I thought it will I was going to do it, but when I started reading it, it turned out no, it's not. My experience should be enough, as in the candidate's experience should be enough. It's not actually, but it is helpful to have some experience because CBAP eligibility itself requires you a substantial amount of hours of business analysis. So that mostly covers what CBAP is all about, but CBAP expects you to align and craft your experience to the Babok structure, how Babok arranges things, the definition that Babok has, what are the terms that Babok uses, etc. So Babok is the golden book for you, golden source of truth. But if I only study Babok, will you pass? No, you have to practice because there are going the practice tests from Techcanvass are going to definitely help you align your thoughts into the exam mode. So it's more academic. If you do Babok, it's more academic, but the CBAP exam trusts and tests your applicable skills. What I remember from my examination, I think more than 80% or 85% of the questions were scenario based. There might be small scenarios like a small paragraph where you have one direct question, like which technique should the person use, or which calculation would be the right one, which is the output that this guy is producing or experiencing, expecting, etc. But there might be large case studies in in CBAP examination, where they might lead you to multiple questions on one single case study or comprehension case. But that's why practice tests are unavoidable. If you read Babok once, would you be ready? Unfortunately, not. You have to go through it at least twice. The second run can be faster and more superficial, but the first has to be thorough. And you have to go through at least the course material. This is the minimum that you have to do, apart from other tricks and tips that I'm going to share with you during this slide. But 2 runs of Babok plus course material is kind of mandatory. Only professionally written material, what you get over the internet, what you get on through Babok from your other people, other trainers like Techcanvass can provide, only that is important. Good news is it's not. You can hack and slash and split away on the material, do whatever you want to do with it, and hack it the way you want. Whatever works for you is the right way to do it as far as the study is concerned. During the test, I can have reference material with me. That was an idea that I went through, that we can have the notes and some shortcuts, abbreviations, formulas, etc. written down somewhere. But no, the test is completely, they ensure that the test is only on what is inside your head, nothing else. And if you're scared that this is too much, I don't think I can do this. If you have already looked at what BABOK is, it's a 500-page document. What CBAP is, 3-hour test of, I think, more than 120 questions, multiple choice, etc. If you think it is too much, no, it's not. You can do it. It is always finding the right technique. So keep at it. Remember what Michael Jordan said: you can fail, but only when you fail, you know how to succeed. All right. So, what do you need? This is going to be simply kind of lighthearted. So, what do you need to study or to begin this journey? You would need definitely the BABOK. You do not need to refer, and the BABOK of the latest version. That is also important. You cannot take a older version because they keep revising it every few months or maybe a few years, and the structure changes, the knowledge areas change, the tasks change, the names change, etc. So there are changes to it, and CBAP will only happen on the latest version. So if one task which was previously in knowledge area A and now it is in knowledge area B, if you refer an older material, you might think it is there, but it is in the CBAP. They would expect you to know that it is in knowledge area B now. So the latest version of BABOK you have to have with you. Second is the material that you need to have. You need to have your Techcanvass material, and fortunately, a lot of the things that you would see, like the techniques or the documents, like brainstorming, workshop techniques, or requirement traceability matrix, or RACI matrix for stakeholders, etc. All of these are generally available as well online. So if you want to study more, if you are not satisfied with what BABOK explaining or the deck that is explaining, you can always go outside over the internet and learn. You understand it from outside, but refer to the terms and statements, or maybe the verbatim, what are the things mentioned in BABOK. That is a kind of approach. So you would need some material to understand what is going on, and you would need practice tests, and they're all going to be multiple choice. If and it is always going to be answer one question only. There will not be two or four, three or four. No, there will always be one question, one correct answer only out of four. So that is a good news. Maybe if you are aligned that way, so you will need to do a lot of practice tests. So Techcanvass can help you with that as well. On a personal level, you would need a lot of determination and perseverance. I took more than 6 months to do it. I lost track in the middle. I shouldn't have. I could have done more because I was not persevering enough. But I could have done more if I had prepared more as well. And you would need a lot of determination. Don't lose heart, again, to referencing that point. You would need mnemonics, like an example of the planetary names. My very educated mother just served us noodles is kind of like a mnemonic to remember the planet names. There is a lot of memorization when it comes to BABOK or CBAP. You have to remember multiple techniques, their outputs, inputs, etc. So you will need mnemonics, tips, and other tricks to whatever helps you remember. That is something that you would need. And finally, you need a positive attitude for yourself. You would need to know that no matter how grim the scenario looks, if you want to do it, if you have determination and perseverance, you will be able to do it. You need to remember and keep that attitude going. As Soumya mentioned, you can have your questions written on the chat, but also, if I will take a pause here because I think I'm going a bit too fast. If anybody has any questions, you can also unmute yourself and maybe ask.
Hey, hi, this is Rakesh.
Hi, Rakesh.
Yeah, so I have a question, like, what is the best approach to, go for the CBAP? Is it like, clearing the CCBA first and after 3 years, we can go for a CBAP, or like, how you suggest, like, we can go for
No,
the CBAP directly?
I
Yeah.
think It is a good question. It is kind of one of the obvious questions that there is no clarity from, I think, IIBA on this, but you can attempt CBAP directly. I did. There is no, you can do either way actually if you are comfortable. It's easier. ECBA and CCBA, I think, although the BABOK remains the same, the scope of the study or the granularity or the crisscrossing or the kind of like closer examination is not there. I think there are questions are of different type, or the understanding is expected to be of a different level for ECBA and CCBA. CBAP expects you to be very thorough. It's the top of the line for the certification. So that way, if you think you can go for it, please go ahead. If you're eligible, I don't think there is a reason for you not to do it.
Okay, okay.
Right. Okay. Next one. How should you study? I think this is something that we get into the approach that we take. It's kind of like a step-by-step approach. That first thing you should do is go through BABA. Forget about once you are done with the training from Techcanvass and other whatever. Then you go through BABA. Even if you have the material, go through BABA first and make notes, your own notes. It would be great if there is a way you can get the entire thing printed out, or maybe a summary printed out. That would really help. You would be able to make hard notes. You won't need any additional diaries or this thing at this stage. What I did was I took a hard copy and I started writing and scribbling and making notes on top of it as I went through. So that is the approach that I took. Go through the first step that you need to do is go through Babok and make notes. The second one is to go through the material, and because the material would probably help you understand it a bit more, it is more on a summarized, on a more representation level, while like a difference between a document and a presentation. So the material would be more of a presentation, summary, highlights, structure, etc. would be there, and you need to enhance your notes accordingly. So if there is something that it is emphasized in Babok and it is emphasized in the material, then you emphasize in your notes as well, and you kind of arrange your things accordingly. So, and when also every time you go through the material, this is very important, that every time you go through the material, your notes should become sharper. It should become maybe more succinct or smaller, or more abbreviations, or it should become more smaller in the number of items that you've written, by more items getting in your brain and not on the piece of paper. So it's easier to do it that way. So you know that, for example, when you look at it, all the knowledge areas and tasks, you should know that it's kind of like a flow, that uh, requirement elicitation will give you elicited requirements, and confirmation requirements will need those elicited requirements as an input. So elicitation has an output of elicited requirements, and confirmation requirement has an input of elicitation requirement. So you, once you see that pattern over there, you would know, and you don't need to really need to write that what is there, what is the input, what is the output, etc. So your output or your notes, as more you revise, should become smaller, more sharper, and more easy to manage. Then you should take a full practice test. I would recommend taking a full practice test just to give you a feel. It can be devastating for your morale, but it is good to do that, and evaluating your strengths and weaknesses. Techcanvass practice tests are very good. They can help you build an understanding of yours, if you are okay in reading, if you're good or bad in reading, if you're good or bad in maths, if you're good or bad in memorizing, if you have a particular knowledge area that you're good at, if you have a particular knowledge area that you're bad at. You can evaluate yourself with your results on the first glance, and then you review your weak areas and your notes, refer to your notes as much as possible. So initially, more weightage on Babok, less on notes. And by the end of it, more weightage on your notes and less on Babok and the material. That should be the kind of approach that is there. And Babok and material should only be referred to for clarification. If you're still lost after your notes, if you don't know what you have written, you go back and kind of update it again. And finally, towards the end, you evaluate your study style, like what works for you. Do memorizations work for you? How do you do speed runs? How do you do maths, etc.? And improve your weaknesses and notes. If you see, it's everything is about notes, because by the end of it, my target was to I will have one page for a large thing. Maybe one side of a A4 sheet paper should be enough for the entire babok for you. You would know exactly what is the gap between them, but that is kind of like what I went for initially. And how do you do that? You take a practice test, you evaluate your notes on how good or bad are they, or how good or bad could you memorize them. You improve your notes and you revise the notes and practice take a practice test again. This is a cycle that should you do, let's say, towards the last 20% of your preparation time. I took 6 months, so I did this for at least the last 1 month of it. So that is kind of the mathematical structure on how should you study. This is from my perspective. um, you can also build things like these. These are sample templates that I built. This is a personal output of mine where I kind of created a chart of the entire knowledge area: task, input, output, elements, techniques, guidelines, and stakeholders. Maybe a lot of these times, elements maybe not be required, but it is good for you to understand what is part of, or what are things that are important in that particular task. So that way it is important, because you can't just memorize 500 pages. So it's better to kind of understand what they're trying to do, and elements help you understand that. And guidelines and tools are also on the similar lines, to understand what do you actually do in as a BA on that particular task. But the rest of them can be important. What can you cannot do. So for example, when so yeah so who are the stakeholders, or what are the techniques that you can or cannot do in these a particular task? What is more not applicable, what is applicable, who can provide the input, who is not required in a particular task, etc. So this will help you do that, or revise or memorize things. And speaking of memorization, so when I talked about mnemonics, you can always use mnemonics. These are something that I found over the internet. You can build your own completely. This is completely customizable, whatever works for you. Um, if you don't want to use this, you can build something on. If you whatever you, some people like to do the music stuff. Unfortunately, memorization cannot be skipped in CBAP. You have to memorize, for example, at least a bunch of the techniques. So if you have in Plan B approach, you have around 15 techniques over here. If you want to remember at least 10 of them, you will have to kind of memorize. How do you do that? It's up to you. And you can apply your own experience. So once you learn through CBAP or BABOK material, if you see that the stakeholder conflicts, I've given a kind of example here, where I saw that these are names are changed. So where then there was an SME and a sponsor who kind of conflicted on what was the exact requirement translation from the regulator in one of my projects. This is true, but the names are changed. I could have used a stakeholder matrix to understand the influence of what they have over decision making and more understanding, and whose neck is more on the line if things go wrong. And a workshop would have helped. If I had done the workshop, I would have saved a lot of time and effort, and maybe even the conflict. So that way, if you apply your own experience, I think you would be able to understand it much better. So these are some samples that I have. But of course, like I always say, you can build whatever works for you, because there is no standard way of studying this, or the right way to memorize, right way to apply. Anything that works for you is good. All right. What should you practice? So when we say practice on the practice test on yourself, but what should you practice? We should definitely practice maths and formula. They're simple arithmetic, nothing complicated, but yeah, you would have to do some formulas there, like um, when you do a process diagram, or a value added value diagram, etc., then that might be required, that who's taking the most time, who's going to do more than that. When you do total cost of ownership, internal rate of revenue, return of investments, these are all formulas that are there. You need to practice those. These will most likely be there in the exam. You would need to have a comprehension and attention to detail revision. These you can do, of course, offline as well. You don't really need to refer to BABOK for these, where you need to understand on a large text. So sometimes what happened, they would give like a half pager of a text, a story, an issue, and they would have 3-4 questions out of them of the same story. So you would need to know or read those quickly enough so you understand what is going on and what is the exact problem, and you need to give attention to detail. How much, what is more important, what are the factors that are influencing this, what is the exact need of the customer or the company in the scenario, etc. So you need to practice on your attention to detail and comprehension skills. You would need to practice more scenario based questions, not less direct questions. Like they might, there's a very unlikely scenario that they would ask situations like which of these 4 options is not applicable to business analysis, planning and monitoring knowledge area. So this is something like an example. This would most likely not be there. More on scenarios, small scenarios, big scenarios. You need to practice those. Your timings, that is very important. You need to time. There is a limited time, large number of questions. You need to come back for things you miss, or if you don't know the answer to something, you need to. You can always come back to it. But during your practice tests, keep a track of the time that you're taking. Short test, big test, full test, etc. Either way, be careful of how much time you're taking in answering a question. But having said that, don't take the first option that comes into your mind as the right one. Evaluate all the time, all the questions. There might be devil, might be in the detail. There might be small things that are tweaking. For example, if you have a large team, globally spread team, in a scenario, if you're dealing with a globally spread large stakeholder team, you would want, how would you want to do requirement gathering within the next 2 days? So a large team of stakeholders, ideally it should be a brainstorming session. But if they are largely spread across the world, then you can do a questionnaire. But if you are doing it in the next 2 days, you might have to do a workshop with a limited number of people who are giving their inputs and collecting them. So that way the answer might be workshop. If you go for if you look at these 3 factors, your answers may vary. So that is why it's important to control your impulse and maybe not look at the first one. Oh, I read this and this is the answer. No, have a look and why these are important. Control your impulse, evaluate the options, and then answer them. And finally, you should practice on knowledge area specific tests. Anyone in the in Techcanvass or on a practice test that you might find, it is always split into specific knowledge areas. If you think they are your weakness, if your strengths, whatever, apart from doing the overall test, you should always practice on the knowledge area specific tests. There are 6 knowledge areas, and the techniques knowledge area is also there, so that is also important. So 7 or 8 aspects of the test you can split out and practice them as well. So these are the things that you should practice. Any questions again? All right.
Hi, this is a
Yeah.
question I have.
Yes, please.
So, how important are the chapters underlying competencies and the last perspectives chapters? Are there any questions indirect in the exam, CWAP exam from those
Highly
chapters as
unlikely.
well?
Highly unlikely. They will
Okay,
not be able to give scenario based questions in these. They would be direct questions like which of these is not applicable or applicable business analysis competencies. So just go through them, understand them. That this mostly, if you were to hire a business analyst as analyst, what would you look for that? What would you look for in that person? That gives you an answer on the on the competencies. You would want to know a knowledge area, technical tools, etc., domain knowledge, etc. Those things you would look for, and that is the answer for knowledge and competencies. So yeah, that's all on the direct questions. Mainly you focus on the knowledge areas and the techniques and maybe the association of that. That is your core subject area
okay,
where the scenarios can be prepared on.
sure. And can I ask one more question?
Sure, sure, please.
Yeah, the techniques as well, like they have lots of elements. So, I mean, is it like, I mean, I know we should memorize all those, but how, I mean, is it very likely that questions on very specific elements from the techniques like comes, or like how
We
should we approach?
No, I don't think there would be questions on elements, but understanding elements would tell you a difference between the example that I gave you. So, for example,
Okay.
if you know the usage considerations of questionnaire, that it takes a lot of time. It can take a lot of time, and the percentage, the probability of response is an important factor. When you are sitting in a room, you can ask for a demand a response from somebody in a brainstorming session. Like that is an element of brainstorming that it enable the moderator as a business analyst should ask everyone to speak up, but in questionnaire you can't really do that. So that those are elements and usage considerations. So if you're looking for a quick turnaround, no matter how widespread your team is, you have to use a workshop, you cannot use a questionnaire.
Okay,
So
sure.
those are the
Thank
things that can help you understand the difference between the right answer and the wrong answer in terms of a tricky question, but that's all they are contributing to. They don't
you.
directly
Okay,
come in a question in a scenario.
sure. Thanks. Yeah.
Right. Am I going too fast? Is this speed okay? Soumya, is this fine?
Yes, Puneet.
All right. Now that you've studied everything on what have you practiced, how have you studied, what do you need to do 1 hour before the exam? Zero. The number of pages or material or Babok you should refer. On one day before the exam, don't even think about Babok. Don't even think about the material that is there. Only refer to your notes. Nothing else. One, the number of hours you should spend on your notes, but that is the only hour that you should spend. You can split it out, you can do that. Most of it should already be in your head. If you're stuck on something like what are the 7 knowledge areas, what are the tasks, 6 knowledge areas, what are the tasks inside them, if you memorize that or you know or you understand that, though you don't really need to look at your notes by then. So only 1 hour, ideally, you should be, that is the only time you should spend on your notes. You should spend around 1 hour on finalizing the exam day logistics. Now that the pandemic, when I did this, it was a pandemic time, so I did it from my house. I don't know what is the scenario. Mostly it will still be online based on whatever agreement IIBA has. But if it is online, you would need to figure out the logistics for that based on the email that you would receive. We will cover that in a little bit. And but that is all that the time that you should spend. You should focus on formulas, memorizations, mnemonics, 2 hours. That's all that you need to do. If required, just revising it. Have somebody with you who can ask you random questions, direct questions, not scenario based questions. Have these practices on direct questions. I did it with somebody in my house. What are the 5 knowledge area? What are the knowledge areas? What are the techniques in this particular one? What is not the technique in a particular task, etc.? Who are the stakeholders in a particular task, etc.? All those things you can always refer to that. You should have all that memorized by now. Have practice tests if you want to understand again what are the patterns of questions, what are the types of questions, and what can you expect in the examinations. But that is a number of hours because I'm assuming that 1 hour or 40 minutes each knowledge area, or maybe 1, 2, or 3 tests of the entire exam paper that you can take. So roughly 5, 6 hours is something that you should spend there. 7 hours is the time you should spend away from your material, and 8 hours of sleep. 15 hours are there. You should relax. You should be ready by this time because otherwise you'll be under so much pressure. It's not even spoken for. It's not funny. You need to relax. You need to. It's the last day before the exam. You're still studying for at least 8 hours in there. So don't worry about more than that. That's all you need to do. So that is my advice. So this is what you need to do. This is how the 24 hours you should spend before the exam. Right, in the exam room, assuming that you are giving an online exam from your house, not an exam center that it used to happen before the pandemic happened, where people used to go in a particular exam center and sit in a classroom with an invigilator and give the exam. If you're doing it from your house, what's in and what's out? What's in is you need to have a PC or a laptop as per IIBA tech specs. some general rules. It should have high-speed internet with video camera and audio. You should always be visible to the camera. You should never cover your mouth. There will always be somebody looking at you as an invigilator online anywhere in the world. You will not be able to see them, him or her, or hear them. They will talk to you while typing, but they will be able to see you, record you from your visuals and audio, and they can poke you that when I did that, I was actually covering my face and calculating or imagining something. They will taunt you that don't do that. You should not talk, you should not mumble, don't cover your face on that. Don't worry, but that's all mostly about it. You should have the admin access because you will need to include you will need to install a software browser which IIBA or that exam company would provide. When that software runs, that is the only thing that you will see on your machine. It is mandatory. You can do that one day prior as well. They will give you a link. So figuring out the logistics is one of those things in there. If you need water for 3 hours of exam, you would probably need a lot of water. You need to have it in transparent bottles only. You need to have a well illuminated room depending on the time of the day that you are most active on. So I did it in the morning after breakfast. That is the right time, I think, breakfast and between breakfast and lunch, where the energies are optimum from my perspective. But your room needs to be well illuminated. They should be able to see everything behind you, and before that as well. We'll come to what will happen during the exam on that. While if you want to do some rough work calculations, etc., you can do 1 or 2 sheets of blank paper with a pen and pencil with you. They would want to see it. They would want to see that you're not carrying any reference material, etc. And that is all you would need. What's not allowed are any phones, calculators, or smartwatches. They would want to see what's on yourself, on your person. They would want you to show them that. And any app or software on the device, they will not allow. Like I said, the browser that they will ask you to install will disable everything except your mouse and keyboard. That is all that will work. Any complex calculations, you can, in the browser, there is an inbuilt calculator. So you will be able to do like the Windows calculator that is there. It is similar to that, but the Windows calculator will not be available. Only the calculator on that browser is available. So you can do the calculations there. Anything else is useless for now. You are not allowed to have food in the room, or you cannot take a break in the middle. So it's better to have a healthy meal before whatever you're sitting for. You will need to sit at one place for 3 hours consistently. You should not have anybody else in the room for the duration of the 3 hours. Nobody enter the room within the 3 hours, because if you are distracted, they would catch it, and there might be issues around that as well. Of course, it should be quiet, so that you don't know anybody is not helping you on that concern. And notepad, notes, or any additional stationery, you don't need anything. Only pieces of paper, no notepads or diaries or anything. So that is not allowed either. So what will happen, ideally, what happened with me was I had done it on the laptop, and when half an hour before the exam, they wanted me to show on the camera, they wanted me to show the room, the table that I was on, under the table that I was on, the notepad that I carried, the pencils, etc. And they need to know that you're not carrying any reference materials, etc. anywhere. What I had also learned from a tip online was that if you are tricky, or if there is a particular abbreviation or list or formula that you're forgetting, as soon as the exam starts, you can write it down on the blank sheet of paper that you brought it with you. You should not write it before. That is not allowed. You show them the blank sheet. As soon as the exam starts, write it down so you don't forget and you can use it anywhere. So that is the kind of bridge that is there. When the exam starts, it should be a completely blank, no notepads, nothing, only pieces of paper. So this is what is in, what is out. I'm sure you have a bunch of questions. There might be a bunch of questions that you might have on this. Let's take it towards the end. We are anyway at the end of the session summary on the presentation already. Let's see. So in summary, you need to work hard and smart. There is no reason to work smart and just focus on abbreviations, because if you only focus on abbreviations, you will miss out on scenarios. If you focus on scenarios, you will miss out on abbreviations. So work hard and smart on this. Pace your study and the test. It is a long run. I took 6 months. I had my work, I had my child, and other personal commitments, etc. So when you look at or when you plan, have your commitments in mind, that if you are in the business side, if there are quarterly and reporting, for example, if you're in the reporting side that I had, I was not able to study on those periods, but then I could compensate by catching up on my holidays, etc. So pace myself, I had to pace myself to cover it within the 6 months that I gave myself. And of course, pacing yourself on the test as well is important. Don't be intimidated by the volume, by the effort, by the notes, formulas, or the very fact that you have to memorize a lot of stuff. A lot of you might already be scared that I don't want to memorize. I don't want to uh, cobble up stuff and then vomit it on the paper. But don't worry about it. Don't be intimidated. It's easier than you think. You adapt whatever I have said, and whatever you find over the internet, you adapt it to your style, what works for you. Nobody's knows your style, your personality, your study techniques, and your circumstances better than you. So you adapt everything according to your requirements. Scenarios take the big chunk, so focus on scenarios. Direct questions itself, they will twist it and bring it to your scenario. Like I gave you the example that if there is a widespread team across the globe, which is the requirement gathering method that you would use. Also, you know that this is a scenario, but it effectively asking you a direct question, that what is the one technique that you should use in case of a widespread team. So that is a kind of approach that they will take. So remember to work on that. And finally, obvious answer may not be right. Even in this example that I gave you, don't go to the first thing that comes to your mind. Unless you're in a rush, then you just pray that what you're answering is right. But let's not come to that. Let's not let it come to that. If know your things, it will be pretty good. And that's all I have. Thank you for your listening. Any questions? No questions.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello. Hi. Sorry, I joined you late, about 5, 10 minutes ago. I don't know whether you covered it. The situation for me is I'm a pharmacist for the last 15, 16 years. So I'm applying for jobs now as a BA. I'm thinking of taking these exams, but I read you should have 10 years worth of BA experience to appear for CBAP. So my question is, as I'm being healthcare domain pharmacist, as a clinical pharmacist, can I use that experience to qualify for CBAP?
I think I would answer that by asking you a question. Have you solved any business problems in your career?
Well, day-to-day challenges, yes. We got to deal with different clients, area managers, and meet the targets.
Okay. How big are the problems, and how long did they take you to solve them? Immediate,
Few
1
weeks,
week, few weeks,
a
roughly?
few weeks, yeah, few weeks.
Okay. So because the question, the reason I asked you this is because I personally believe anybody who's solving a problem is a business analyst. All right, it doesn't have to be a designation of a business analyst. Anybody is solving a construction problem or a consulting problem, management consulting, strategy consulting, etc. There doesn't have to be a software related business analyst, for example. So have a look at what are the scenarios on the business analysis side. If you can have somebody who can vouch that this was the role of a business analyst when they have stakeholder engagement, when you have a problem, a current state, future state, and you were a bridge between that, etc. Add up to 2,500 hours. I think that is the eligible criteria, and you should be good to go. Other than that, if you still think that you are short of 20 or what is eligible for CBAP, you can go for the you have two choices. You can go for the other certifications, ECBA and CCBA, which have lesser certification criteria, eligibility criteria, and or you can wait for a few years and come back to CBAP.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Puneet, we have one question from Vikram on the chat. He says, what
Mhm.
is the benefit that you found after doing CBAP?
Yeah. One thing that will definitely happen is you will know what you did wrong in your experience, in your past projects. If you had any challenges, CBAP will kind of put you in front of a mirror and tell you that this is what you should have done in particular scenario. If you're understanding the book correctly, you would know that, and that would definitely make you a better BA. And you would also it will of course tell you things that you didn't know previously, and with that you would be able to handle these things properly. I started a project right after my CBAP examination in my current firm, and I did much better as a BA than I did before that, even though I had around 12 years of experience. So that way it will help you become a better BA. When you look at it, when you have a large number of conflicting stakeholders, you would know a RACI or a stakeholder persona, or maybe a stakeholder diagram, association diagram, etc. would definitely help you. So you start building those things and you know what to do better. So you become a better BA. On the professional growth front, I think CBAP, it definitely helps. Yet it proves as a certification that you know your stuff. So that way it helps as well. If that answers the question. Anybody else? All right. What next after CBAP? You can. There are multiple. I think there are other BA organization. Sorry, I didn't catch the second message. Soumya, can you read that, please?
He's saying, what's next after CBAP that keeps you moving in terms of growth, in terms of career prospects? Yeah.
Um, I think growth and career prospects for a BA is should be the one that you should look at. Like I mentioned, that anybody who solves a problem is a BA, in my opinion, honestly. By definition, there might be other things, but of course, the definition that even IIBA provides, that BA is somebody who solves a business problem, adds value to stakeholder, etc., etc. Anybody who solves a problem is a BA, although they might not hold a BA designation. So you can be a BA, you can move on to consulting. Even if you become kind of like a CEO of a company, you're adding value to your stakeholders by adding value or monetary value to your shareholders or investors, for example. You have challenges of growth from future state. Let's say at $1 billion company, you have a future state of $2 billion. What do you need to change? What do you need to grow? New market, new product, new efficiency in the company, etc. You can outsource your activity of a BA, but that is also part of, as a BA, what is the best decision for you. You understand the skill gap and you fill that up. So the role of a BA, almost everybody is a BA from a role, and that is where I think the career progression will take you. But the certification helps, but other than that, it's completely personal. What do you need to do? What do you do with this? What can I say? I'm ready to go. Okay. You are ready when you are and you are successful in Okay, I think I should read the question first. I don't know if it will be recorded. The question says that when should I know if I'm ready to give the CBAP exam? I think you would be ready when you are successful in completing the complete practice tests with only casual mistakes. If you think you know the answer, but for some reason it is wrong, or maybe you misinterpreted, or you missed on a particular detail, that's fine. But if you look at a question and don't know what to respond completely, then you're not ready. So as long as you know you have an inclination on what is the right answer on how should you approach this, if you have that kind of an understanding for throughout the complete practice test, the full practice test, I think you should be ready for CBAP exam. And then you can fine tune yourself on how do you approach questions, how do you time yourself, what to look for in a particular scenario to give the right answer, etc. That you can always fine tune. But I think, if I'm not wrong, you need to kind of suggest in some substantial time in advance that when do you need to give a CBAP exam. I'm not sure if that is the scenario now, but yeah, that was there. So am I going to read that question? I think it was pretty long.
Yeah. I heard that for the scenario questions where there are several questions to answer from a few paragraphs to read, that we
Mm-hmm.
should read the questions first, then read the paragraphs. Would you agree?
Yes and no. It is a technique that is there in a comprehension when you do prepare for any kind of comprehension or multiple choice based on scenarios. That should be the case. But I personally think reading the question, it actually, if you read the paragraph first, it saves you a lot of time in answering the question, or at least you know where to look for when you look at a question. Say, for example, um, if you look at directly the question, where is it? You don't really know what the scenario is. If you look at the question of what is the best option for the company to do, you don't know what the problem is. You go back to the case study and look at it, and you find an answer. Fine, in the first paragraph, so be it. Next question, you go something that is in the fourth paragraph, then you have to go through the entire case study. The next question would bring you on the third paragraph. So all those things you might have to go through a lot of times through the case study if you are doing that approach. But if it is kind of standing out for you, might work. And if it I would recommend that understand the problem as in a live scenario. You don't really jump into the question and jump into the conclusion, and understand the problem first. So I think that is the approach that you should also take in the exam, that you understand the scenario and you know what are the factors. You make a list of this on this, or you can know that, okay, this is where it is mentioning the timing issue, this is where it is mentioning the cost issue, this is where it is mentioning what are the constraints that the company has. Then you can go for looking at the answers and come back to case study or the paragraph depending on the question. So it's kind of like a hybrid of the two options. But I would recommend having at least a cursory look on the paragraph being the first priority that you should look for. Is there anything else, Soumya?
Yeah, there is one more question from Vikram. He asked, there is a significant overlap between BA and PO. So I tend to get confused whether I should pursue IIBA certification or CSPO.
I'm sorry, I don't know which is PO.
He's talking about product owner, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think product owner is a stakeholder in a business analysis. I don't think a product owner solves a problem per se. I think he has more responsibilities than that. On a general scale, I think the financials, resource management, efficiency, and of course, development, enhancements, etc., are their responsibility, but not direct ones. I don't think the BA has to worry about that. They can suggest the financials, but the approval has to come from the product owner. You can evaluate them. For example, if the budget for a particular product to manage that, or a particular initiative to manage, is limited, the BA would actually gather the information that to solve this, this is the money that you would need, this is the RTO, or sorry, this is the ROI, this is the TCO, etc. You give those numbers to the product owner, and the product owner takes the call. I don't think BA has any decision making on the enterprise level. The PO would probably be in a better position to do that. So I think execution is more the accountability of the BA, the execution of the change, while sustainability of the change and making the right decision is the accountability of the PO. I think that is it. I am not really sure on more details and more intrinsic comparisons between the two. So this is my guess for now. Anything else? You can also speak. You don't have to always chat. You can unmute yourself and talk if anybody has any questions.
Guys, we have a session on next Saturday on question. It's an open Q&A session wherein we will be taking your questions related to IIBA certifications and PMI certifications. So, you can go to our website and register. So most of your doubts related to a particular certification, or if you want to know more about IIBA and PMI certifications, you can definitely register for that webinar. I think most of your doubts will be clarified in that session also. Yeah.
Hi, I have a
So,
question.
Yes, please.
My question is regarding the techniques, right? So there are around 50 techniques. I'm in a self-study mode for the CBAP material. Yeah, right. So there are 50 techniques, and in many cases, the techniques are overlapping between various knowledge areas. So what was the methodology that you used to sort of figure it out, especially when the questions involve multiple techniques? How did you go about it?
So your question actually has two parts. One is the mapping to tech tasks, maybe, or knowledge areas where a technique as how do you map it. So I kind of like showed you here. It went back. Sorry, here. The table that you see in front, this is kind of what I had built. You can always build that. And it is also available in one of the appendices of the BABOK towards the end. It is technique versus knowledge area or task mapping. It is available in BABOK. And you can have a look and apply that. But mostly it's if you understand what the task is trying to do, you understand what can a technique do, mostly there will be an overlap on what you need to do. So for example, if you are confirming a requirements, right, you will not use a brainstorming session. You cannot use a workshop either, because you are actually confirming, because you tell the requirements and they say yes or no. The stakeholders say yes or no. It's more like interviews or maybe a presentation, etc. Something that you would need. You would probably not need a workshop or a brainstorming in that. So in that sense, if you kind of have an idea of what the knowledge area is doing and what the technique can do, if you compare them, you would have an answer. If not all, a bunch of it. And maybe that will be something, an inclination that will help you to associate a technique with a task or a knowledge area. And the second question, I'm sorry, I missed that, the last part on this.
Yeah, so I was asking, while reading some of the questions, I feel like there are multiple techniques that could be applied, but the answer is looking
Yes.
for one.
Yes, like I said, if you go into the intrinsic details on the usage considerations and elements of these techniques, you would know what differentiates a workshop from a brainstorming session. I can directly think of that in brainstorming sessions, there is no judgment, there is no cross questioning. Everybody is allowed to speak, and every point is noted down. There is no shutting down anyone, this is wrong. There is no word of this is wrong in a brainstorming session. But in a workshop, there is. In a focus group, it's the feedback. Focus groups are mostly about feedback. They are not mostly about fresh starts. You already have some information, you are getting a feedback from that. So that is the difference between focus group, workshop, and brainstorming session. And based on that, you would know what to use when. I think the usage considerations and elements on what these things do will help you kind of differentiate between them. And when it comes to the exam, if you see the scenario, what do they want? If the company is evaluating a product, if the company there is a requirement that the BA has understood but it wants to confirm, then what do you need to do? You need to use a focus group. So a focus group can be used there. An interview can also be used there. A presentation, a prototype can also be used for confirming requirements. But yeah, if the option says focus group, you can go there in that direction. So I think that is the approach that you can take. Understanding usage considerations and elements is important in differentiating between techniques. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Very helpful. Thank you.
All right. If there are no more questions, Soumya?
All right. So thank you, Puneet. Thank you everyone for joining. We have upcoming batches. So our CBAP and CCBA batch will start on 23rd, and our ECBA batch will start on 16th. So if you would like to enroll, you can check out our website. You can note down the details of the contact below, and you can enroll. Thank you everyone for joining, and hope you all have a great day. Thank you, Puneet. This was really insightful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Thanks, guys.